Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show, Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by CIS's own John Cohen, Executive Director. John, how are you, sir?
Doing great, Sean. Doing great, my friend.
Wonderful. Welcome back to the show. And John, we've got a very interesting topic here. So it's coming up to, travel time, as it were. We want to talk about some of the personal and professional security risks that others may experience when traveling. And, we kind of wanted to dive into that. I wanted to get your thoughts and some of your experience. You got some excellent stories here on what we need to do in terms of both security risks, prevention strategies. I'm really starting to think ahead. And again, you just got back from Europe, so I think we've got to bring that into the show as well, and your experiences there too. So John, I'm going to start off with this thought is, when we're thinking about security risks and traveling, what are the most overlooked risks, in your opinion, that we need to take seriously as both professionals and on personal travel?
Yeah, I think it's important that, as we have come to experience in this country, a rapidly evolving threat environment that very often includes criminals and terrorists and hostile foreign intelligence services using a combination of cyber and physical threat techniques. The same thing applies when you're traveling. So whether you're at home or you're traveling on vacation or for work travel, just as we urge people to be aware, to take steps to protect their information security, take steps to protect their physical security, that doesn't just apply while you're at work. It also has to become ingrained in your day-to-day life at home, and it certainly has to become part of the way you prepare to go on a trip. So just as, at least in my situation where my wife and I had to have discussions for weeks leading up to our trip on what clothes we would be wearing and bringing, and how we would be prepared to bring home things that we bought on our European trip. I also spent quite a bit of time making sure that I was aware of the threat environment in each city that we were traveling to, and that we put in place protective steps to ensure that our iPhones, whatever electronic devices we brought with us, were able to be operated in a secure way, and that we had a good plan on how to protect ourselves from physical threats as well. So that's just sadly just what you have to do to have a relaxing and fun vacation or a work trip these days is plan, be prepared, have contingencies set up, and then enjoy your trip.
Exactly right. One of the things I see, John, is I'm going to use this term, and a little bit facetious, but is the gloating pictures while you're away, getting those on social media. And I even see it on the professional sites too. As you're engaging from a professional perspective at conferences and things, oh, look who I met today. And it kind of gives, some of that element away of, oh, well, you're not home anymore, or you're in this particular location. Me, threat actor, I'm here too. Let's connect. Let these types of things, these types of open source intelligence elements really lead to some threats. Would you agree in that space?
Oh, absolutely. You raise such an interesting point. As somebody who's worked both, criminal investigations as well as counterintelligence investigations, foreign and domestic threat actors acknowledge the fact that so many of us in our day-to-day lives post so much information online, not only describing what we have done, but what we are doing. And they will use that information to engage in social engineering efforts, to target us, to give up our passwords or our sensitive information. They'll use that information to understand when we're not going to be at home, and perhaps when our homes might be vulnerable to being broken into. From a counterintelligence perspective, I've recruited assets in the past. I would have loved to have social media available to me, because even those of us who work, those who work in sensitive positions in the military and law enforcement and government, just post so much personal information online, and that just increases your vulnerability. It increases the vulnerability or the potential that a foreign intelligence service is going to see that and going to be able to use that information as they seek to figure out a way to exploit you, whether you're at home or you're traveling, and obtain intelligence from you, whether wittingly or unwittingly. So, you make a really good point. Maybe you hold off posting on social media that you're going to be gone for 2 weeks traveling across Europe. Maybe you hold off talking about the military or the security conference you're going to go attend. And maybe you hold off putting every personal detail about yourself online, because maybe that'll prevent a criminal organization or an intelligence service, depending on what you do professionally, from using that information to target you.
100%. Well, let's stop here, John, really quick for a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Operating systems in the cloud are vulnerable to malware, misconfiguration, and more. That is, unless you securely configure them. Enter the CIS hardened images. These virtual machine images come pre-hardened to the CIS benchmarks, providing built-in security and compliance you can trust. Available at less than 3 cents per compute hour, CIS hardened images save you time and money managing your cloud security posture. Available on all major cloud service platforms. So spin one up today by visiting cisecurity.org. Now, John, when we're thinking about preparation, and you've mentioned, discussions that you had, it's not only what you wear, but a skeptical mind of where you're going. What are some of your top 3 security practices you do or would recommend before someone leaves on this travel?
From a physical perspective, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the State Department website. U.S. State Department, particularly if you're traveling abroad, will post quite a bit of information about criminal activity and other threat-related conditions in countries you may be traveling to abroad. And more importantly, what you can do on that website is sign up, where you put the details of your trip in, and the system will sign you up for real-time alerting. So if you're in Florence one day, Venice the next, and Rome, the following day, the system actually follows you and provides you real-time updates about crime trends and terrorism threats and other information. To do the same thing domestically is take some time and look at the crime statistics and look at information that's being posted by local police departments across the country. Local police departments have become much more sophisticated in putting out information regarding crime trends and threat-related activity, even information regarding major public demonstrations that could disrupt motor vehicle traffic or access to sites that you may want to see. Learn that in advance. Don't be caught by surprise. So the first thing I do is I obtain and maintain awareness about the location I'm traveling to. Next thing I do is I think about, what am I going to bring with me? Do I need to bring a laptop? Do I need to bring my phone? Can I use you and I would call it a burner phone, but can I get an iPhone that I can use temporarily just for that trip? Should I swap out the SIM card? If the answer to that is no, if you need to bring your laptop or you need to bring, your personal phone with you, there are some things that you can do to protect yourself. So for example, bring a charging cable and keep it with you in your carry-on, so that if you're sitting in the airport for 4 or 5 hours or several hours and your phone's going dead, you're not having to plug into a public charging station, because we've seen reports by law enforcement agencies across the country about how criminal groups have been able to use those public charging stations to introduce malware on people's phones and then use that to gain sensitive information. So have a charging cable with you. If you're using your laptop and you're going to be use Wi-Fi, whether it's in the hotel or in the airport or wherever, and it's free Wi-Fi, make sure you have a VPN, or try to maybe spend a few bucks and use the Wi-Fi that you have to pay for, but you also have to sign into, so it's password protected. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't type your password in, or don't type sensitive information like banking information or other personal information while you're sitting in a crowded waiting room and people are looking over your shoulders. I mean, you wouldn't do that in your office, so why would you do that in a public place while you're traveling? On the physical side of the house, look, this is the same thing we tell people each and every day. Maintain awareness of your surroundings. When you're going into restaurants, bars, public events like concerts or sporting events, make sure you're aware of, when you walk into the location, where are the exits. Keep your head up, look around. Maybe while you're traveling abroad, you reduce your alcohol intake so you maintain awareness. But also it's important to know what are the unique crime issues that are relevant to the place you're going to. So we traveled to Europe this spring, and what we were told over and over, both prior to our trip and during our trip, is violent crime is not an issue, but pickpockets are. And so as we went into this trip, we had a plan on how we were going to protect our passport, our personal papers, our wallets, to minimize the potential that we could be successfully targeted by a pickpocket. So that you don't just like we talk about every day, Sean, at work, you don't want to make your plan after you've been targeted. So
yes, exactly right. Exactly right. It's the Benjamin Franklin, right, going back, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of cure, something along those lines. Anyway, excellent. Preparation, definitely putting ourselves in a position where we're thinking through. And one of the things, we try and do, John, I think, is that the worst case scenario. What happened if this were to occur? I lost my passport. Do I have a copy? Do I have a picture of it on my phone? What is, a practical application of that? And ultimately on the phone as well, do I have a consulate, number on my phone, depending on, where we're traveling specifically internationally, so that I've got, contact reliability in terms of, who am I talking to? Are we taking, copies of those and putting them in our wallet as well, a physical copy in case I lose the phone, in case the phone runs out of charge? I don't have the international adapter in order to charge the phone. Now, where does that leave us? And again, John, I think, just as an aside, as we're traveling internationally without connectivity, it seems like we're lost, right? We don't have GPS, we don't have access to information where, what was that restaurant? I need directions in this place. And again, being in a different area that is unknown to you, I think obviously causes that susceptibility to being a target necessarily in some cases. And, you've got the adage of, you'll think of tourists in Times Square with the map open, right? And it's, okay, these are signals to certain individuals that, here's an easy target. And the target's always going to be the easy ones that are gone to first, because there's a greater, lower chance of risk, greater chance of success. And so I kind of flow through that in my head as I'm going. And you may say, look, you're going away to relax, and it seems like you're putting yourself under a lot of pressure. But again, I have to go back to that quote, is it's going to pay dividends in case you're in those situations, right? These are the insurance. This is the preparation you put in play so that you're not in those situations. Or if you are, that you've got a plan of action that can, certainly help you in that space.
That's so funny. It's so interesting to hear you say that, because, in different areas, my wife and I are very similar. 2 weeks out before our trip, my wife could tell you every place we were going and what outfit was the appropriate outfit to wear, and what accessories would be the appropriate accessories to have with that outfit. And that I think that's great because it does kind of tie in to what you were saying in the sense that in some countries, individuals are identified as tourists and therefore targeted because the way they are dressing, the way they are behaving is inconsistent with how the people who are local behave, whether it's how they walk around or how they dress to go into certain places and things like that. Yeah. But she does that level of planning. For me, it's exactly what you said. It's like, what are the worst case scenario? Where is the council? Is there a consulate in every city we're going to be in? Do I have paper copies of the passport? What happens if my passport and my phone are taken away from me? Do I have, I went through and actually wrote down key phone numbers and other information that were stored on my phone, but I developed as part of my plan, what I would do and how I would contact key people if I didn't have my phone and my contacts and that information. But the other thing you said, which is really interesting, and it's true, is on the one hand, we have navigation systems now on our phones, and that helps you navigate, whether you're in the U.S., or abroad. It helps you navigate from one point to the other. So you're not that highly visible person attracting attention because you have the big map that you got at Texaco or wherever, and you're saying, now, how do I get here? Or it doesn't, it lessens the potential that you have to walk up to people who don't speak English if you're in a foreign country and ask them loudly, how do I get to someplace? So on the one hand, having the navigation on your phone reduces your stress, right? You put in one location, where you're going, and it gives you step-by-step instructions how to get there. On the other hand, what are you doing while you're following that navigation? You got your phone out, means people see you have an iPhone. Second, you're staring down at your phone, which means you're not looking around at your surroundings. So you just have to remember that the ease that's coming on the one hand from using, the smartphone also may, you have to adjust so that it doesn't actually make you a more viable target.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the new Texaco map, right? Is the phone looking down or checking your watch in terms of direction?
Because what do we always tell people to reduce the potential that they are going to be targeted as a victim of a crime? Is keep your head up, look around, maintain awareness of your surroundings, make eye contact with people, because people who are going to target people for crimes are looking for people who are unaware. On the other hand, you're using your phone. It's helping you get from point A to point B. It's helping you, reduce those times in which you're going through a sketchy neighborhood, but your head is down. You're looking. You're following the directions, and as a result, you probably are less aware of your surroundings, which makes you, at higher risk.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in some cases, John, one of the things when I've been traveling too that I found incredibly useful, it may sound silly, but it really does help you attune to the environment, is there YouTube videos of literally walking through streets of major cities or potentially where you're going and just looking at how the people walk, interact. Some of the locations, some of the monuments, some of the location elements that you can identify very easily, either from a distance, and again, obviously, depending on the city that you're in, it may be hard to get something in the distance. New York City, you turn one corner, there's a skyscraper, and where's the Statue of Liberty? I can't see it from here. But there are elements that can aid in that preparation by at least getting a feel for both the landscape, the people, and kind of the flow in some cases. I've been to some countries where it's, wow, this is so relaxed. Or you go to the hustle and bustle of certain cities and it's fast paced. And being attuned to that helps you, and it's not blending in, not to be a chameleon, but it is to help you acclimate in some form or fashion more realistically to being less of a target, and also trying to understand and representatively, John, I think it's also understanding the culture and actually being aware and present in that particular location to kind of absorb that as well. I think it's one of the mind-broadening elements of travel. Being able to do that, I think, can also assist in overall enjoyment, actually, of the travel itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we were in one city, and in our last trip, and we were advised that when we were walking down the sidewalk, stay to the right, stay on the right. And if you're going to walk slowly because you're looking in store windows, don't obstruct, because the locals tend to walk very quickly down the sidewalk. And if you're not on the right, they will yell at you. And I don't know about you, but there would be nothing more unpleasant than if I'm standing on the sidewalk in a city that I'm not used to, and all of a sudden people are yelling and screaming at me because I'm blocking their ability to walk from one point to the other. So, and it was true, because I saw plenty of circumstances when, just this last trip, when people were walking on the left-hand side of the street, going in the opposite direction that others were going in, and it not just turned into yelling, but turned into sort of, confrontational interactions between people. And that's just, you don't need that. You don't need that stress on your trip. So take time, understand sort of the rhythm. When I was a police officer, I was taught by one of my training officers, the world operates in certain rhythms, right? And the way to observe that something, nefarious is afoot is when there are interruptions in that rhythm of where, the location where you're at. And it's really true. It's people walking at a certain pace, walking in a certain way. It's people going in and out of locations. And when things occur that are outside of that normal rhythm, that's what attracts your attention as a police officer. What's the same thing if you're a crook, right? You're looking for people who don't fit in, who look like they're out of place, who look like they may be confused by their surroundings or struggling to figure out where they are. Because those are the people that are susceptible to either some type of social engineering, even if it's social engineering trying to scam somebody physically, or provide information that can later be used for an identity theft or something like that. People, the most common technique for people engaged in that type of nefarious activity is to figure out a way to strike a connection with somebody. And what better way to do that than to find somebody who is apparently lost and confused and is struggling to figure out how to get to where they're trying to get, or how to do something to enjoy their vacation. And you step in and you're the savior, and you sort of just start developing that social bond with the person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we probably could have a 50-part series on all your experience in the space. But let's start off that series with just anything you can share from a personal or your past work experience. Why, again, you take such care in preparation, and what has led necessarily to an ability to assess situations, understand threats, and be prepared for them. Any stories that you'd like to share?
Well, I think there's a lot of stories. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to share them or not, and maybe it would horrify a few people. But I think, look, I obviously for the last 2 decades have spent a lot of time looking at terrorism-related threat intelligence and intelligence about how criminal organizations operate. And I often say to people, you don't want to be in my head, because, with that greater, understanding, it does introduce within me just the need to be, ultra prepared and ultra able to deal with a broad range of threats. But, the fact of the matter is we're in a dangerous world right now, and it's just on the terrorism front, particularly if people are traveling abroad, they need to take the time to understand what the conditions are in the country that they may be traveling to. The other part of my career, as you know, Sean, is counterintelligence. And, I have been a target for foreign intelligence services for a big chunk of my career. And in the other chunk of my career, I was working counterintelligence investigations, trying to locate spies who are operating in the U.S. So I got some visibility into how they operate. And, I think a much broader range of people from the U.S., beyond what I think most people would anticipate, are attractive targets for foreign intelligence services. I mean, if you are a student, if you are, working in critical infrastructure sectors, if you work for the government in any capacity, if you work for nonprofit organizations that deal with cybersecurity or physical security issues or extremism or other threat-related issues, you're going to be a target. And in particular, if you're traveling to a city where there is a conference that is, or meetings that are public, are known publicly, and are focusing on some of these issues, you have to at least acknowledge that you may potentially be targeted by a foreign intelligence service. I used to do a lot of trainings for, and this is where you're probably going to like bleep me out or something like that. But for parts of my career, we used to have to do briefings for military and other senior government officials, and even lower level, lower ranking people who were traveling abroad. And I was in a briefing once with this old time counterintelligence guy, Cold War veteran, and he loved to do the briefing about honeypot operations, where people will run an attractive person against another person and hoping to strike up not just a communication, but create a situation that can later be exploited to have that person be willing to provide sensitive information. And the guidance he used to tell these folks in these briefings was, look, if you're at home and you don't have attractive people coming up to you in restaurants and bars and talking to you, then you should be really suspicious when they do it while you're traveling. And, it's true. I mean, and, these types of operations occur both in the digital honeypot operations, or operations where people are trying to strike up these personal relationships for intelligence purposes. They don't just occur, but they still do, in the physical world. They also occur in the digital world. So as I think you and I have talked about, anytime I'm on TV talking about Russian intelligence operations or Chinese intelligence operations, I all of a sudden start getting a ton of emails from people with attractive photographs of people saying, hey, I saw you on Facebook. I'd like to get to know you. Click on this link. So, if you travel abroad to a conference, or you travel to a conference, then all of a sudden you start getting emails like that, or emails, inviting you to give a speech in Beijing, you might want to let your security officer know.
100%. Excellent, John. Yeah, I mean, it really then starts to solidify some of the things from an awareness perspective, but then also that preventative perspective, right? This, being skeptical, respectfully in certain areas. And then, John, finally, I just wanted to finish up with thinking about technology. It's, I think, a double-edged sword. I think it's obviously an enabler, but it also provides elements of convenience, and those conveniences can turn into necessarily issues. The one that comes to mind, John, is RFID with respect to wallets, credit cards, those being susceptible to being skimmed necessarily, being copied. And these tend to, you see these, again, from individuals in many different locales, on many different situations and trips, but certainly high-risk areas that you want to be aware of, so an element of an RFID blocking wallet, something along those lines, maybe turning off Bluetooth on your phone. As you mentioned before, that travel-only device, or swapping the SIM, as an element of protection. These are things to start thinking about and enabling in terms of these types of threats. And I really like the USB charging station. We've started to see a lot in that space, not only for data exfiltration, as you mentioned, malware implant, really becomes something that we need to be wary of. And this inherent trust that we have as well. And again, not saying don't trust, but it is a skeptical eye that we look in these spaces, because ultimately there are opportunities. But anyway, wanted to get your thoughts with that.
No, you're exactly right. So all my credit cards are in those protective sleeves, right? I get instant notification anytime there's a charge made on any of my credit cards. And that's important because increasingly what I'm finding, well, one, you don't want to hand your card over to a server and let them walk off. And increasingly, though, restaurants, particularly abroad, are using these portable, credit card swipe machines. And as we've talked about before, there's a vulnerability in the air gap between the machine and the system that potentially can be exploited by cyber threat actors. So, protective sleeves for my cards, instant notification, notifying your credit card company that you're traveling abroad and your bank. So if your data is compromised and all of a sudden charges start, you either notice it or they pick up on it immediately, and you can minimize the damage. Those are just like basic things, unfortunately, we have to do today. And they're very, they're basic, but we have to do today to try to protect ourselves or minimize the damage if we are successfully targeted. But, I think it's important to note that, just because you're traveling doesn't mean that you're not vulnerable to being targeted for phishing scams. There's a whole, industry out there where they'll create fake travel websites because they know that people are going to start trying to get information. So those websites are designed to collect information from you. There's technologies out there that if someone simply knows your phone number, they can turn your phone into a collection device where they can activate your video, activate your microphone. They can see whatever data is on your phone. They can see what you're typing into your phone. So, again, when you go on travel, you want to enjoy yourself. You want to be relaxed. So in order to do that, at least in my world, the more you can plan and mitigate the potential that you will be successfully targeted is what makes your vacation more relaxing and enjoyable, or your business trip more successful. I would just put it this way. I would rather spend some time before my trip stressing out a bit and developing plans and being prepared than having to deal with the outcome of being successfully targeted by a cyber threat or cyber threat actor or some type of criminal or intelligence service while I'm there, because my trip will be a lot less enjoyable if I'm having to replace my passport, deal with credit cards that have been compromised, having to protect my bank account from being drained, or having been targeted by a criminal for some type of physical criminal activity.
Wonderful. John, again, thank you so much. Like I say, we could probably talk for a few more hours and not even touch the tip of the iceberg, but I really appreciate your time, your thoughts, and your expertise, and really helping prepare those, again, for this summer and travel season, to be prepared, both in your professional and business life and in your personal life. It's very important to take these elements into consideration. Now, John, one website that I wanted to provide was the travel.state.gov, which you had mentioned previously, is one I've used before. Very, very important. That gives you the real-time alerts. You can enroll in the STEP program, and gives you all contact information for specific countries and cities, for consulates and important phone numbers as well. So important to check that out. And again, John, thank you so much for your time today.
It's great to be with you. And let me just give a plug to your office and your colleagues in most major companies. And many academic and nonprofit institutions have a security office. Whether you have a reporting requirement or not to that security office, they generally have very good advice on measures that you can take to be better prepared. I know here at CIS, I felt very fortunate to be able to leverage the resources of the security office, and it helped me be better prepared as I went for my travel. And again, just to reiterate, spend some time in advance being prepared and having a plan and taking some steps to protect yourself, because that will ensure that if it's a business trip, it'll be more productive, and if it's a vacation, it'll be more relaxing.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And thank you to our audience. Make sure to check us out on YouTube at The CI Security. Subscribe on your preferred podcast platform for episodes like this and much, much more. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.